I'm critical of Eddie Hearn when I need to be. I criticised him about his offer of the Quigg Frampton fight. That video's online if interested. But I believe in balance. I'm not Team Khan or Team Brook. I'm not Mayweather or Pacquiao. I'm not Hearn or Warren. I'm here just to discuss boxing and boxing issues as I see them. And I'm not going to change that opinion based on what is popular with the public or not. I did a video a few days back saying that I actually liked the Kell Brook-Frankie Gavin fight given the circumstances. The video's title is something like, I like Brook Gavin, 9 reasons not to hate on this fight. If interested, please check that out. But I got some really interesting feedback from that video. There was a predictable few people, obviously it was in a good way, but a few people who criticised it, completely disagreed. And there were 1 or 2 people who, took my points on board, maybe still disagreed with me, but changed their opinions slightly. And I appreciate the video that I'm about to film probably will not sit well with the mainstream boxing fans, with the average person who's going to watch the video. I appreciate that it probably isn't going to lead to a flood of thumbs up, a flood of positive comments, etc. But what can you do? I'm interested to discuss the truth. And look, if I wanted to, worry just about sort of views and stuff, I'd create a video saying Gennady Golovkin, Deontay Wilder, Manny Pacquiao, pound for pound the best 3 fighters in the world. But I'm not doing that. I'm here to discuss the truth as I see it. And I think the criticism of Eddie Hearn's May the 30th card, specifically it being pay-per-view, is completely unwarranted. I think this card is pay-per-view. Now granted, people associate pay-per-view occasions with big fights. People associate pay-per-view with Floyd Mayweather when Floyd fought Ricky Hatton, now with Floyd fighting Manny Pacquiao. People associate it with Fox Groves. And when people talk about pay-per-view fights in future, we typically view pay-per-views as a matchup between 2 big-name fighters. So, for example, Quigg Frampton, Khan Brook, Groves DeGale, Fury Hay, those sort of matchups. Now let me start off by saying I admit that whilst I like Brook Gavin on its own is not a pay-per-view fight. Frankie Gavin, for a start, doesn't have the public profile. He doesn't have that history of winning reasonably sized fights in order to headline a pay-per-view fight. And also the fight just isn't very competitive. It's very rare to have a successful pay-per-view fight where one guy is such an overwhelmingly heavy favourite. And let's be honest, Kell Brook is an overwhelming favourite and deservedly so. So I acknowledge that the fight on its own is not a pay-per-view fight. I accept that when you look at the poster that Eddie Hearn produces and Kell Brook and Frankie Gavin's faces are on it, it's probably not going to sit well with the majority of people. But don't let hate for Eddie Hearn, don't let hate for the pay-per-view model cloud our judgment here. This truly is an absolutely exceptional card that Eddie Hearn is building. I fervently suggest that this card has something for everyone and really is one of the strongest cards that I've seen for some time. Let me run through it briefly. For the casual fans, you've got Anthony Joshua versus Kevin Johnson. A massive, massive step up for Anthony Joshua. Even for us hardcore fans, it's a really intriguing fight. How is Joshua going to respond when someone knows how to defend themselves? How is Joshua going to respond when power alone is not enough to win the fight? How is Joshua going to respond after he has to go a few rounds? It's a fascinating encounter, and I'm really, really looking forward to that fight. you've got a couple of really mouth-watering trade 50-50 fights for the hardcore fans. John Wayne Hibbert versus Dave Ryan is an excellent matchup. John Ryder versus Nick Blackwell is a superb fight, and the kind of fight I've been desperate for John Ryder to be involved in. Really looking forward to both of those matchups. Towards the top of the bill, Kevin Mitchell versus Jorge Linares, I believe for the WBC version of the Lightweight Championship. This is an example of Eddie Hearn doing something that fans have been very critical of him for not doing previously. Eddie Hearn is bringing over an existing international world champion. He is securing home advantage for his fighter, and he is bringing that fighter to the UK to defend their belt away from home against his man, Kevin Mitchell. Selby Gradovitz, again, I think it's the IBF version of their title, a similar situation. Hearn's put his money up, he's secured home advantage for his man. Now the other two things about these fights is they're both 50-50 fights. Selby Gradovitz, Mitchell Linares, arguably on both fights, I slightly lean towards Eddie Hearn's fighter. I slightly lean towards the challenger taking the belts. And what a great night that could be for British boxing. Some great undercard fights and then two new British champions, potentially at a world championship level. But two occasions there where Eddie Hearn has done what the public have been asking him to. Put up what I would imagine is a very, very sizable amount of money. Got these guys in to fight and defend their belts away from home. Now the headline fight, I've discussed that fight at length in another video, so I won't rant on about it for too long here. But let's put it this way. On top of the two international fighters defending their world titles on UK shores, on top of Anthony Joshua in a big step-up fight, and top of two enticing, mouth-watering 50-50 domestic classes in John Wayne Hibbert, Dave Ryan and Nick Blackwell, John Ryder, you also have an all-British title fight. Brook versus Frankie Gavin. This is a really good card. 3 world title fights involving 4 British fighters. This is one of the most competitive cards you will see in some time. All of these fights that I've mentioned are 60-40 fights, 50-50 fights, Real tight action. I think where Hearn's gone wrong in the past is on Cleverly Bellew, it was all celebrity boxers in sort of uncompetitive matches. Here you've got a combination. You've got your Anthony Joshua's on the bill. You've got your Kell Brooks on the bill. You've got your names. But you've got real competitive fights. I think it's a really, really good card. Really good card. Now, in terms of the... I'm going on for a bit here. Apologies in advance. I am having issues with my equipment at present, and as a result I can only upload videos up to about 14.5 minutes in length. So if I spill over, it may have to be 2 separate videos. I'm not doing that. I know it's annoying to have to click from one part to the other. I'm genuinely not doing that to try and get extra views. It's not how I like to operate whatsoever. And I'll try and rectify that as soon as the finance is there for the new equipment. But just to let you know in advance, that's looking likely that it will happen with this video. But I did a piece the other day about the finances behind a pay-per-view, the finances behind Quig Frampton, and whether that offer is justifiable, the £1.5 million offer. Now what we worked out is that the total income for a fight like Quig Frampton was conservatively circa £9 million. I would suggest it's very similar for this O2 bill. 20,000 tickets, average price is £75 a ticket, £1.5 million in ticket sales, approximately £500,000 pay-per-view buys, £15 a pop, £7.5 million pay-per-view. The income is 9 million. You know, Sky then take half of the pay-per-view revenue, which leaves Hearn with circa £5 million in terms of what he's got to spend. If you want a more detailed breakdown, please check out my previous video which discusses that. So Hearn's got £5 million to spend. How much do you think he's paying Jorge Linares to come over to the UK to defend his belt in a risky fight? How much do you think he's paying Gradovic to come over to the UK and defend his belt in a really risky fight? How much do you think he's paying Kevin Johnson to come over and fight a frightening heavyweight prospect who's going to try and take his head off? How much do you think he's paying Brook, the biggest name on the bill? How much do you think he's paying Frankie Gavin? How much is Kevin Mitchell going to ask for? How much is Selby going to ask for? How much is Ryder and Blackwell, Hibbard and Dave Ryan going to ask for? What about all the other undercard fighters? What about the costs for security around the venue? What I'm getting at is I think that this card needs to be pay-per-view. You know, Frank Warren's been vocal recently about how much Sky would pay for one of the bills just on a standard Saturday night fight card. This event, this combination of fights wouldn't be possible. We can't have it both ways. We cannot complain that Eddie Hearn fails to secure home advantage for his fighter, and yet on an occasion where we have 3 British world title fights, then complain that it's pay-per-view. If it wasn't pay-per-view, I don't see any way how this card could happen. I'm not buying into Hearn's hype here, I'm not just repeating what he said, but this fight, this card, does not go ahead without the pay-per-view model. Kevin Mitchell doesn't get the home advantage, Lee Selby doesn't get the home advantage, an all-British world title fight is not made without this being pay-per-view. There is a counter-argument, and it's a strong one. It's the only thing that possibly dissuades my opinion, which is that recently the shows on Sky have been very, very weak. You know, we've got a Birmingham show with no star quality. We've had a Leeds show with limited star quality. We've had a Newcastle show with no star quality. The strong argument is that Eddie Hearn has put so much investment into building these pay-per-views, he's neglecting the average Saturday night show. They are dropping and dropping and dropping in quality. There are less big names fighting on the average Saturday night show. And as a result, the Sky consumer is getting ripped off. They already pay 40, 50, 60, 70 quid a month for their subscription package. And now we're not getting the big fights as part of that subscription package. That's a strong counter-argument. Arguably, we could have had Selby one Saturday, Mitchell a Saturday a month later, Anthony Joshua Johnson a Saturday a month later, Brook Gavin a month later. I get that. We could have spread them out over the course of several months and maybe had 4 separate smaller bills. But to be fair to Eddie Hearn, for this card to take place, I think pay-per-view needs to go down. And I think it's a really, really good card. Let me know your thoughts. I'm keen to discuss. Let's not let hate for Eddie Hearn and let's not let hate for pay-per-view make up our minds. Let's look at the facts. I think it's worth it for £15, £17. Thanks for watching.